I received a request under one of my videos. Somebody wanted some information on a supplement called Glycerol monostearate. And so I'm going to talk about that today. Glycerol, monostearate, by the way, is just a form of fat. Glycerol is an interesting substance. It engendered a bit of popularity in bodybuilding circles maybe 25, 30 years ago because it had the reputation of producing tremendous pumping sensation when you work out. It was kind of the precursor to the nitric oxide supplements that followed a little bit later. The idea was that if you ingest a glycerol supplement, you would get these hellacious pumps when you worked out, which is very satisfying to bodybuilders. And a lot of people think that a pump is directly related to muscle growth. It is not. It's just an engorgement of muscle with blood. Now, the reason why glycerol was able to do that, and I'll get into more detail in a minute about this, is that glycerol retains water, especially internally, in the blood and in the cells, and so it does has a double effect. But to understand what glycerol is, you got to look at what is stored fat. Stored fat, technically, well, glycerol is a sugar alcohol. That's the way it's classified biochemically, which is neither here nor there. There's a lot of sugar alcohols. They often use them as artificial sweeteners, and glycerol is a little bit sweet because again, it's a sugar bound to an alcohol. But probably the most familiar relationship of glycerol in biochemistry is that it forms part of the triglyceride structure. What are triglycerides? Triglycerides are basically fat. The fat that's stored in fat cells is stored in the form of triglyceride. The structure of a triglyceride is three fatty acids attached to a glycerol backbone. In other words, the three fatty acids attached to glycerol. When your body mobilizes fat, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it has to do with, for example, the release of catecholamines like norepinephrine, epinephrine. They stimulate a fat cell enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase, which in turn causes the triglyceride to degrade into its constituent free fatty acid and glycerol, which are then released into the blood. Now, the way a lot of scientists judge the mobilization of fat by any source is they look at how much glycerol enters the blood. The level of glycerol in the blood is considered a good indication of fat release from fat cells. Another interesting effect of glycerol is the fact that it itself is an energy substrate for a process called gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is a process that occurs in the liver. It involves taking certain nutrients, such as amino acids, lactate produced during exercise, and glycerol, and converting it into glucose. Now, 10% of fat, or the triglyceride structure, 10% of that as glycerol can be converted into glucose in the liver in the process of gluconeogenesis. Now, interestingly enough, fasting is very popular today. Various types of fasting, whether it's a prolonged fast, intermittent fasting, or whatever. Now, the main source of energy in the body is stored carbohydrates or circulating glucose in the blood. Of course, when you're resting, fat is the main source of energy. When you're not doing anything but fat, it's only tiny, tiny amounts of fat. Otherwise, there would be no such thing as fat people. If fat really was a major source of energy during rest, that means you'd be burning your fat all the time, and there'd be no such thing as obese people. So obviously, it's tiny, tiny amounts. So we skip over that and we look at the really true source of energy. The main source for the body is glucose and glycogen. Glycogen is basically stored forms of glucose. It's stored in the liver and it's stored in the muscles. In fact, the muscle glycogen is the primary fuel for anaerobic exercise, such as bodybuilding training. In other words, the glycogen in the muscle is what gives you, it's related to the acquisition of a muscle pump. It also makes your muscles look fuller, which is the reason why many bodybuilders do what they call carbohydrate loading. Let's say in the final week before a contest, they want to fill their muscles with glycogen, because each gram of glycogen is stored with 2.7 grams of water. And the idea is by filling the muscle with glycogen, you present a fuller appearance to the muscle. Now, in regard to fasting, for the first couple of hours of not eating any food, your body will first go through the circulating glucose in the blood, and that doesn't last that long, and then it'll start to utilize liver glycogen. In other words, the glycogen in the liver will be broken down, a process called glycolysis. The glycogen in the liver will be broken down by enzymes into glucose, and that maintains the glucose level in the blood, because your brain and certain tissues, the eyes and neural tissues, depend on glucose. So the body always wants to maintain a pretty steady glucose level in the blood. So as I said, after a couple of hours, first you exhaust your glucose. I'm talking about fasting. And then after then your body will start to dip into liver glycogen. Liver glycogen can last anywhere, let's say maybe 12 hours. And after that, your body starts to utilize, especially longer term, for 12 to 16 hours, your body starts to utilize. By that time, most of the glycogen is gone, it's depleted. So what happens is your body starts to utilize other sources of energy, including fat, stored fat. And with longer periods of fasting, glycerol becomes, remember, as I said, stored fat, triglycerides, 3 fatty acids attached to glycerol. With longer periods of fasting, glycerol becomes the primary substrate for gluconeogenesis, because the liver glycogen stores have become depleted by not eating. Under normal circumstances in which the body has ample amounts of glucose to burn for energy, glycerol used for gluconeogenesis accounts for less than 5% of glucose production. Research has found, in the context of prolonged fasting, glycerol is the only means of gluconeogenesis, and as such, more than 20% of glucose production during extended fasting occurs through the metabolism of glucose through gluconeogenesis in the liver. In these glucose-starved states, the body turns to other means to generate glycerol, in order to make glucose. Research has shown that pyruvate, which is a salt of pyruvic acid that lives with it, that's found within fatty tissue also, can be used to form glycerol as long as it has sufficient amounts of these 3 intermediate compounds, which is oxaloacetate, adenosine triphosphate ATP, and nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or NADH. Interestingly enough, I mentioned this stuff called oxaloacetate. That's usually derived, you might have heard the expression, fat is burned in the flame of carbohydrate. What that means in a practical sense is that you need a certain amount of oxaloacetate, which is involved in the Krebs cycle, which is involved in the production of ATP. Way too complicated to get into in this video. But the point is that oxaloacetate is needed to burn up fat. So without oxaloacetate, even if you're on, let's say you're on a fat-burning diet, or you're ingesting a low-calorie diet, you're not going to be able to burn fat really effectively. Well, the good news is oxaloacetate can easily be produced from certain amino acids, and it's the reason why people who go on, let's say, very low-carb diets or ketogenic diets, they still burn fat because they still can produce some oxaloacetate. So, but getting back to glycerol, this explains how, people who are on low carbohydrate diets, a lot of critics of low carbohydrate diets always say, well, they're very bad because you have to have glucose. Glucose is very important. Glucose is important, but it's not essential. Carbohydrate is not essential in human nutrition. I don't know, anyone who says that is just full of crap. It's not biochemically correct, and the reason for that is gluconeogenesis. In other words, in the absence of ingested carbohydrates, your body can take other substances, as I said earlier, lactate, glycerol, even certain amino acids, all can be converted into glucose. And this is the reason why, even if you're taking in no carbohydrates at all, your body is still going to produce glucose through gluconeogenesis. In fact, about maybe as much as 50% of ingested amino acids can be converted directly into glucose through the gluconeogenesis process. Now, when ingested orally, glycerol raises osmotic pressure in the body's total volume of water. And this is how glycerol started out as an ergogenic aid. Long-distance runners, there's a problem. When you're running, let's say, a long race, a marathon, or ultra-distance, you're running under hot, humid conditions, you can become dehydrated very fast. Now, if you ever watch a marathon race, they have stations along the route where they give the runners, as they're running, they hand them cups of water. This is to prevent dehydration, because dehydration can have serious consequences. It can cause a heat exhaustion, even possibly heat stroke, because the body temperature goes up too high. So, it's very important to keep the body hydrated when you're exercising in a warm, humid environment. Now, what they found was glycerol is like a magnet that attracts water, and it pulls water internally into the body, especially into the blood, where glycerol, especially when you drink water with it, can increase the volume of the blood and keep it there. And when you drink water, the problem with water is that eventually it's just going to be excreted. The more water you drink, the more water you excrete, because of processes like drinking water inhibits antidiuretic hormone. I'm not going to get into that, but the problem with water is that you drink it, but you piss it right out, to put it bluntly. Now, the difference with glycerol is when you take it with water, rather than the water being excreted, the glycerol actually helps to maintain the extra water in the body for extended times, as long as 24 to 48 hours. Now, it's internally. The water is internal. It's in the blood. It's also, glycerol increases the water content of cells. That's called increased cell volume. And when a cell is hydrated, meaning when it's replete with water, it sends out anabolic signals that are conducive to increased muscle protein synthesis, which is related to increased muscle hypertrophy. So in that sense, you could say that glycerol is indirectly has an indirect anabolic effect. As I said, this effect also the glycerol effect also influences the body to retain more water, effectively increasing its overall volume. And when you take it with water, when you take glycerol with water, the two effects yield a state of what they call hyperhydration. The body not only holds onto more water, but moves it efficiently. This helps hydrate muscles, attenuating onset fatigue as they work. In order to capitalize on these effects, glycerol is best utilized alongside a sufficient water intake. Very important to drink water when you're using a glycerol supplement. Glycerol helps deliver an extreme. This is right from an ad. Loaded up with water, glycerol helps deliver an extreme water-based pump that rivals that of the popular nitric oxide-based ingredients. Because of the increased blood volume caused by taking a glycerol supplement, as I said, it retains water in the blood. The blood is largely made of water. The increased blood volume when you're working out gives you a greater muscle pump when you're working out. And this is why glycerol was popular with bodybuilders years ago. Glycerol also, from a health standpoint, because it prevents dehydration, it takes strain off the heart when you're exercising. So glycerol tends to promote a lower heart rate during exercise. And studies have shown that when you take glycerol before exercise or sports, it increases aerobic and anaerobic power output and endurance by as much as 24%. Now, glycerol supplements it's like sticky. They use it in protein bars. You'll see it on the label of various foods because it's sticky. It holds the ingredients together so they don't fall apart. But when it's in a powder supplement, it tends to clump. So glycerol-based supplements contain other ingredients that minimize the clumping effect. Because you have to understand, pure glycerol is actually liquid at room temperatures. So when you have a powdered glycerol, it's not going to be 100% glycerol. Some of them are about maybe 65% glycerol, but the rest of the ingredients in there are put in there to prevent clumping and to make it a little bit more palatable. So again, it's very important that you ingest sufficient water for glycerol to work properly, because if you don't, taking glycerol without water, you get side effects that include nausea, gastrointestinal discomfort, and lightheadedness. What's the average dose of glycerol for supplementation purposes? Usually it's 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. Usually 5 to 10 grams a day is what's average. That's what's used in bodybuilding. So to sum it all up, glycerol, it's not, you don't hear much about it anymore. Based on the existing research, I would say glycerol is an exceptionally good supplement to take if you're involved in hot weather activity for extended times. Doesn't have to be a long distance race. Let's say you want to go for a long hike somewhere for a couple of hours, and it involves hiking when the weather is hot and humid, where you might be sweating a lot. So you want to take glycerol beforehand and drink water along the way. That'll keep you hydrated. You'll feel a lot better, and you won't be subject to the serious consequences of elevated temperature due to water loss, such as heat stroke. And as far as bodybuilding goes, taking glycerol will give you a pump. If you want to go for the psychological effects of getting a greater pump, you can do that. But of course, there's other supplements that'll do the same. Citrulline, because it's converted into arginine, which is converted into nitric oxide, that'll give you a better pump. Of course, you can take the nitrate containing vegetables like beetroot juice, certain leafy vegetables like spinach. They contain nitrates that are converted into nitrite, which will be converted into nitric oxide. It'll give you a great pump. So there's other ways to get a pump without taking glycerol. But again, I don't want to be redundant here, but I think the really big advantage of glycerol is for hot weather use. If you're going to be exercising, whether it's a gym or outside, in very hot, humid weather, and you're one of those people that sweats a lot and loses a lot of water, glycerol can make a big difference. It'll help you to train harder. It'll keep you hydrated. So that's it for glycerol. If you want further information about nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging research, ergogenic AIDS hormonal therapy, supplement science, effective fat loss techniques, women's health and fitness, and many more topics, subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. And when you subscribe, it's about 30 to 50 pages every month. No ads, pure evidence-based information that includes my nearly 6 decades of empirical knowledge. In other words, what I've learned in the gym and along the way that you just can't, this isn't taught in any type of academic program. This is the school of hard knocks. I'll tell you the mistakes that I made so you don't make the same mistakes. It's all in Applied Metabolics. And it says there's something in there for everybody. I have general health articles. You don't have to be a bodybuilder or a powerlifter or an athlete. There's something, if you're interested in health, longevity, feeling good, then Applied Metabolics is for you. There's other digital publications that are devoted to strength, nutrition, and they're pretty good. They're a little bit academic in the style. In other words, a lot of them tend to resemble medical journals in the way they're written. They're kind of written in a technical style. I've been a writer for over 45 years. I know how to write for the public. So my writing is not in an overly technical style. And any technical terms that I do have to mention, I readily explain what it means so you don't have to reach for a science dictionary. So that's www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise science, and medicine. You have to be a subscriber to get an invitation to join that private Applied Metabolics page. Also, I have there's a email portal on my Applied Metabolics web page, where current subscribers only can send me short questions about maybe anything they read in Applied Metabolics or anything like that, and I'll answer them. You have to be a current subscriber. I don't answer unsolicited questions. So that's about it. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. Thank you for listening. Again, I'm using this microphone, so if any of you decide to complain about how you couldn't hear me, I'm going to give you a free piece of advice. Quickly, make an appointment with a doctor who specializes in hearing, because if you can't hear me with this thing, you're deaf, period. So, by the way, look, if there's somebody still complaining about the sound on my videos with this thing, which the microphone has been rated #1 in dozens of videos, if you're still complaining, then you're basically a troll. And I'm not going to respond. I make it a practice not to respond to trolls. So that's it. Take care. If you want to have the best friend you ever have, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. Thank you for listening.